His story begins today with the appearance of a young man, while he was masked by his neck and surprising, and says what happened. I am alive. Impossible. For a while I was remembering what happened to him before he woke up from sleep. He remembers that he was one of the great warriors in the past. But one of the warriors surrounded him and wounded him with the sword. The warrior says to him, he is standing while he was falling on the ground from wounds. The warrior says, this is the way that ends. Giselun Bertium, the king of mercenaries. The warrior falling on the ground from the wounds is Giselun Bertium, the king of mercenaries, while the standing warrior is the bearer of his sword, one of the 7 best warriors in the continent. The noble knight, Eden, says, Eden has ended. The war has ended. Any last words for you? He replies to him, saying the king of mercenaries, Giselun Bertium, not unfortunate. I was not able to achieve his revenge. Eden looks at him and says, for your argument, I did not expect to be the oldest son. For the falling family of Bortium, I left the family after the death of your sister, right? Giselun says, how you know that, and you are from his king. I know I have made my best for a long time in an attempt to follow you. Because we were the one who worked with his family, Dolphin, to bring down your family. The king of mercenaries is annoyed by Giselun from that news, and says to himself, there were other people behind this other than the family of Duke Delphin. Idon says, well, there is no benefit from explaining the matter more because you will die soon. Just accept your fate now. The king of mercenary Bertium screams, and he is annoyed, O slave. I will never forgive you. Eden beheaded the head of the mercenary, Giselun Bertium. The story moves to Giselun, who is holding his neck and looking at the mirror, and says, he cut my head. Yet I am here, and my head is still on my shoulder. Was all this hallucinating? I will serve as infidels of magic experiences, or something like this. These arrogant jewelry will make them. They regret my life, while it is immersed in thinking. So if one of the soldiers shouts, sir, please, come out, the young master, I know that you are awake. A soldier from Bortium, Cardo Giselun, goes to the soldiers quickly. He takes the sword and makes the soldier to the soldier, and says, I will live you if I answer my questions. Soldier Ricardo says, I think this is a cross-border, sir, is a young man. He says that he gave birth to his response Ghislaine asks the soldier what you are talking about. The soldier says, I am tired of your anger earlier, and slept. He says what? I am not the soldier. He says, did you forget everything? After taking his saying, I had anger with anger about the way the group will be ordered with the raids of Elgalen. Giselun Elgalen says what? I had anger with anger. What is this nonsense? The soldier says all your purposes are waiting. Washing, the soldier asks, where are we going? Al-Talati says we are going to ownership of bird, of course. Giselun screams and says, what do you say again? It comes out of the tent and looks from the top of the mountain to the property. He says to himself that it is really owned. Why is it sound? I saw it, and has turned into ashes. At that time, the soldier goes to him. He says, do you have a terrible nightmare, or something from this invitation to your home as a fallen house? You will be expelled if the contractor hears that. Giselun says to himself, do I dream now? But I do not think that is my younger face. The emirate in its original state. This means that I went back to the past. I have sought my smaller myself from the family. The lack of maturity resulting from the feeling of inferiority, which led to the problems. With the passage of time, more family members avoided me. I was not able to bear the criticism and fled away from the house. After several years, I became mercenaries who have survived from countless battles, strengthened my skills and made a name for myself. Returned to Bortium Clips to compensate for the mistakes of the past. But my house had already crashed and turned into dust when I went back. I lost everything. But now everything here is still all the people who are still here. I cannot even believe that. I want to sing a song, Farah, but it is too early to rejoice. He said that we are here for his raid on Elgalen. I not forget that day. This day is the day that most people will die in the raid division. In my previous life, I used to follow the Garad Elgalen band in an attempt to make a name for myself. At that time, the report said that there were only 3 Galen. They were fighting. It is easy, including enough for a person who has no experience in leading his division. But when we got there were more than 20 ghouls. Almost all of it ended because I was stubborn and I wanted to lead the group. It should be implemented, including enough. Given that these Galen did not really have a strategy, the problem is if these men will trust, because they all believe that I am an inevitable tomorrow. While Ghislain was suddenly thinking about the Galen attacking them, you destroy one of the monitoring towers. Galen attacks the soldiers and kills the soldiers, suddenly, screaming one of them, "Prepare the formation, do not panic, so that we can enter the defense formation." The raid of the raid, Skoven was the one who orders the soldiers, so they are formed to defend themselves. He attacks one of the Galen, but Galen repels the attack. Skoven says we have caution. We are exposed to an ambush. While we were not ready, absolutely, there is more than reported. Also, at this rate, we will all die. One of Galen is trying to strike her, Commander Skoven, from the back, but Ghislain goes towards the leader, keeps him out of danger, and does his attacker, the young master Ghislain, in his attacker, and cuts off the soldiers. With the commander Skopen with amazement. They did not expect the young master what he did. Then, the young master Ghislain dropped the ghoul, heading towards the leader, Skoven, and asked you. The leader is correct. The young master Ghislain extends his hand towards the leader and says, "Give me the validity of the leader. Give me the right to lead." Commander Skoven says to himself, "What is the right to lead? I know that I am foolish, but to ask for the right to lead when our soldier's life is to be simulated." Commander Skoven gets up and says, "I cannot. Do you think this is his game? Even if you are the young master, I cannot give up the authority that Roses gave me this easy." The young master Ghislain is upset by the leader's response, and says this is annoying though. I was narrated in the same way. If one came to one of the foolish, and asked the right to lead, one of Galen attacks the people of the young master and leader Skoven. The leader says, "Recover, I will take care of things here. You are still without experience to lead our forces." The young master Ghislain says, "I have no choice," to throw his sword towards the ghoul. But the leader Skoven is upset with him. He holds his clothes and tells him, "What do you think? That you are an actor?" Who looks at the leader, Skova, to the ghoul finds that the sword has hit his head. The ghoul falls on the ground. The leader says to himself, "What? How did he get his weak point?" The young master, Skoven, "Doesn't you also know what is the most important thing in the battle? There is no hope to win the battle when you are. Our forces are full of fear. We need to gain momentum." Go the young master with an accelerator to take his sword, and go towards Galen. That attacks, and kills her. The soldiers look at the young master, and did not believe what they see. After what ends the first ghoul, the young master screams and says, "Come to you, Galen, I will kill you all." Galen attacked the young master, but he attacked them and injured them deeply. The leader looks at her and says to himself, "Am I dreaming? Even as a mana user is difficult for me to do anything. So how does this slim young master do all this? I can already say that he is tired, but he uses the smallest movements to avoid attacks, and he uses his skills in the sword to strike their weaknesses, such as Sayed Saif without mana, or maybe something greater." The young master Ghislain shouts on Galen, saying, "Is this all you have? My body did not heat up until you do not rise to the level of you hurt as a warrior type." Soldiers look at the young lady, who are surprised. They say they are all rushing towards the young master. Why is the young master running? Commander Skoven looks at the young master and says to himself, what she thinks of hell. Running was to the Gillen group and attracted their attention. Well, but the escape now. In this direction, there is the edge of the slope. Commander Iskoven thinks and commands the forces to establish the wall of the shield. Commander Skoven says we will follow the first sun. The young master escapes and Galen pursues him. He says to himself, Skoven, I am sure that you realized what my plans are, if you are a skilled leader. He is fighting Galen on the edge of the slope and says, although I prefer to cut them all myself, my ability to bear the filth will not be able to deal with that until then. This should be enough for you to deal with it. The forces are surrounded by Galen on the edge of the slope. The young master says, "This is excellent." Throwing himself from the slope, Commander Scovin, the soldiers, orders to attack the besieged Galen on the edge of the slope. The forces are doing what the Galen happened, and dropping them from the top of the slope. While the young master was adhering to the edge of the slope and did not fall from the slope, the soldiers rejoice after getting rid of the Galen, and say that they finally managed to kill all these guilt. But the leader Scovin went towards the slope to help the young master. Ghiselin finds him sticking to his sword, smiles the leader and says to the young master, "He grabbed my hand," but Ghiselin could not hold the leader's hand and slid his hand from the handle of the sword, falls from the top of the slope. After his roof from the slope, he wakes up while he was in one of the houses, and he was treated from his wounds. Looking at himself, says, "I am alive. They seem to have been able to save me." Ghislaine tries to get up, but he is exposed to severe pain from his body. He says, "My whole body hurts me. It should be a result of pushing my body to the maximum. Well, I think this makes it easier for me to know that I am still alive." One of the girls interferes with him and says, "Mister, you are awake," looking at Ghiselin, and says, "Blinda." Blinda says, "Do you know how worried I did not tell you? You must let the soldiers deal with the goblins." The young master goes to embrace Blinda, saying what to do. "Did you do something wrong, Mr. Al-Shihab?" says, "I am happy to see you." He says to himself, "My personal teacher, Blinda, since I was young, she was the only one that continued to stay next to me despite the stupid behavior. But after the family destroyed and disappeared, I was no longer able to see it again. I never thought that I walked it like this." Blinda says, "What makes you happy like this while we see each other every day?" Ghiselin says, "I want to tell the truth to Pauline. Listen to me with care. It will be a catastrophe on Bardium soon." The teacher says, "Blinda, what do you say?" Mercenary King Ghiselin Berdium says that I have died and returned to modesty. Plenda interrupted him, and she definitely says, "I'm sure that Galen almost knew you." He says, "What is this? Not what I mean." Blinda says, "Are you aware of you, Bridium, in a greater danger?" Blinda reprimands him and tells him if she continues to make chaos, she may go to prison. "Really? Stop performance and do stupid things. Do you understand?" He says, "She does not believe me. I think this will not succeed." "Grandfather, what will you do if you were so much that you were not able to go to the festival?" Ghiselin did not remember the festival. The teacher says, "Did you really forget that? Mrs. Elena was waiting for the day when she would go to the festival with you. It will be a great opportunity for you to be close to each other again." Ghiselin says, "Right. There was a festival that is always held at this time of the year. In the past, I did not have time to enjoy festivals because of my painful experience." The teacher asks how long to the festival. Says the teacher, "The next week. You have a week until the festival." Ghiselin says, "The week's week, which changed my life. The memory that is still chasing me." She remembers a girl asking him to go with her to the festival. He says after 1 week, Elena will die. While he was remembering, one of the girls knocks on him the door and says, "Are you inside?" Ghiselin goes towards Elena, accelerated and thorns her, telling him what to tell her. "I miss you." Elena Baki is strongly removed from it and says, "Let me go." He suffers and says what an amazing force of his child is this power always, says Alina. "Blinda asked me to be here." "What? The game is playing. Do you think this makes everything well?" "Apologize to the teacher, Belinda." He says, "I was not the closest to Elena in my last life." They didn't understand the apology. Blinda says, "Is Alina apologized, saying that I heard that Galen besieged you. Did your head hit?" Ghiselin says, "No, I really defeated them. Why do you continue to point out that I was beaten?" Elena says, "Yes, it is true that I was completely defeated. All of them, that case. I have even lost consciousness." He looks at them and smiles, saying to everyone, "As I remember, why did I miss my past? A lot of time and inevitable things." In the festival, which comes next week, Alina's offer to go together. I made in a sense because the events that occurred in the raid made me feel upset. That was the last time we saw it. Elena's body was found, trying to pieces with her personal guards. I should have. Suddenly with her, they heard the door beats. The personal guards of the Miss Elena, Philip and Jamal, enter them. She tells them whether something happened. I told you to wait abroad, Jamal says. We apologize for your request to supervise their work regarding the festival supplies. Ghislaine says, why they might ask. Elena says, Blinda, you will not know, sir, because you are always lazy all day. Elena leaves and goes to work. Ghislaine says to himself, do we have a point in the workers? I did not care about these things at that time, so it is clear that I do not know. He is asking Elena to help her look at Binda and Elena to him as they are surprised. The young master goes with them to the market, but people in the market are afraid of it, and from working with it. Elena beats him, says, is this the way you treat someone who wants to help? Elena says the way you can help us is to stay away from our way and out of problems. The young master Ghislaine says in himself, the body of Elena was found near the poor neighborhoods away from the festival's land. One of her called her to there or forcibly transferred her there for those who have been needed to know the entrances and exits of the castle first. Judicially comes an old man towards washing, while running and screaming. Sir says, are you fine? He goes to Mr. Al-Sham, and says, your humble servant, fair goes. Elena is happy with the arrival of the old man, says a great time, O old man. The young master is upset and grabs his head, and says I can't do anything about it. I will know what is going on around the castle better in the next week. The young master asks, the old man says, oh man, old. There is an abandoned training field in the castle, so do you also take me there? The old man says, sorry. The field of training for any reason? The young man says to him, I want to train. Take me to him. They arrive at the training place. The young master Ghislaine looks at him and is surprised. He says, what is much better than what I expected? It is a completely suitable site for me to train in it. He looks at the weapons and says I have never seen anything like this as a mercenary. The old man says, we kept it in the event of your desire to use this facilities. I'm sure that what it is going through is just a stage. Mr. Al-Shazid says in himself in the life of the past. Was he also cleaning it for me? If this is what happened, you go to the old man and say, you must live a long life. Oh old man, a feeling of death is disgusting. The old man says, I will give you a sorry. You are acting as if you have already tried life and death. The young master looks at her while he is smiling, and says, as expected, I am serious. I have already died. The old man says, I think it is sufficient. In vain now, Moulay. The young master says on any solution that can be returned, O old man. He says to himself, I was always treating everyone around me, and they were my enemies. But I was just short-sighted. I have a week, at that time, can reveal that the person behind the death of Elena was a master from the neighboring area. Thanks to this, Bertium was involved in the war, which led to its fall. Elena's death was basically the starting point for the conditions of our house. This means that I must set things in their right affliction from the first. Here, the first needs to have a better physical structure. It is unfortunate that I do not have much time, but I must be able to control the mana at least. Mana is a supernatural supplier that allows humans to penetrate their borders. Most people say that the observation and absorption of Al-Mana is the most difficult part, but I was able to do this even in the chaotic battlefield. I have to connect the floating mana molecules in the air and collect it as if I were recycling for a person, like a person who has the news of thousands of tens of thousands of battles. The creation of Nawa mana is like eating the cake. But if it was so, I would not have been part of the 7 strongest on the ground. Using the way it is derived from the semi-burning magic book that I picked up, and the natural essence of Almana for human beings, I can create a multi-core network to create an explosive force. 3 nuclei is a limit, although I managed to reach a 5th in the past of the past. This method allows the creation of an explosive force in a short time, but also requires a very large amount of mana in return. This was the main reason that made me lose in front of Eden in the life of the past. Bring a full Farsani brigade to fight against me. When I carried out the mana from me, I would have definitely win if it was a fair battle. It is essentially unstable technology, but this is now enough for a young body, and a lot of time. Your head is in the hands of this time, Eden. Even those times who stand behind the Delphin house. Those who helped destroy our time will destroy you all. The story moves us to the festival day. The young lady is preparing himself from weapons and several. He goes to the festival, looks at him. Elena is surprised and says, "You really came? What happened? You never come to these types of things." The young master, well, says, "As an individual from bird, a day, I must come at least to the festivals from time to time." Elena looks at him and says that you were acting with his real exile recently. "I heard that you did nothing but training last week." The young master asks her, what is wrong with his successor, his family, all of whose members are knights. Elena says you didn't care about these types of things before. You are the person who said that my father was annoying, and that you were already wished for, the master. She tells him before you leave the place, and say anyway, "I love the way that things are going on now." The young master says in himself, "You realized something last week. Given that the effectiveness has changed, my reception and the future also start to change slowly. The general flow of things may be the same, but it is difficult to measure the effect of my actions on small events. The good benefit from the information received from the future is my job. I need to respond to each situation effectively. Now my preparations were completed for the festival." Elena holds the grandfather of the young master and goes with him with a tour of the festival. After a period of time to take a break, Elena says it was fun, but it became a little boring, with the matter remaining as it is every year. "Is there something new this year?" "This year," the young master Ghislain says in himself, "the festival ended almost, but nothing happened because I am with Ellen." While he was thinking about himself, attending the personal guards of Mrs. Elena, and telling her, "Do you want to check another area as well? According to my friend, there are new events elsewhere. What about that? Elena is really better to be fun to go to wander with them." The young master looks at them, and did not move from his place. Knights of accompanying Elena, Jamal, and Philip, have been reliable knights because they protected Elena since she was his child. It was known that they were killed while protecting Elena in my past life. They reach one of the streets, blocked in all respects. Elena, looking at the streets, which isn't empty, there are only the boxes that cut roads and streets. Say, "What is this?" "There is nothing here." "Are you sure that there will be an offer in such a place and destiny?" The personal goalkeeper, Jamal, says, "I think they are not ready after. People are soon here." Eileen behavior says, "Do not make me laugh. Do you want to perform in a place like this?" The young master looks at the place and says to himself, as expected, "This may seem as a simple, deserted at first glance, but given the places of obstacles that hinder the road to escape, they must have made preparations in advance." Elena, withdrawing the young side Ghislain, who has decided to stay away from this place. While his departure was one of the guards, he says, "Let's wait a little more." Elena, Philip say you are acting strangely. "What sermons you today?" says the goalkeeper. "I did not mean to fear you, but it came to us, a reasonable request." Elena says, and she is afraid of any request. Suddenly, some people go to the grammar. Elena and the young master, as they wear long clothes that cover them completely, they are hidden under it. The weapons say, the leader of Frank, who has white and long hair, and blackness, as expected to do your work clean. They say personal guards. No, Elena, of course. We have brought the lady a young man, as we promised. So let's finish his deal here. Frank looks at them and says, "Is this not the eldest son of Bird? On a day, do not think I asked to bring him here." The goalkeeper, Cecile says, "For free. We followed us with his foolishness." The young man looks at the personal guards and says, "Jamal, you lose us. Do you really think that you can get out of this?" Jamal says to the young master, who is smiling, "Why do not you start anxious about yourself first? All we have to do is to escape to a far place." They felt bored and tired of this poor land. "I am sure that there are many others who left their tower in any case, right? Go the young man with the grammar, and make his body with a sword and say at least he never sold us." The young master, the god of Philip, looks and says that you do not think that. But he takes Alina, he says, and he is afraid to collect that fool. The young master throws his sword to hit Philip in the middle of his head, and fall on the ground. And Elena goes to her brother Ghislain. The guards who came with Frank say, "Are you sure that this is the oldest son of Bertium? I think he had no real fighting experience or basic training." Frank was annoyed, and said, "If we judge through his appearance, I am not wrong." Frank says to himself, although they suddenly raided him, but he was immediately killed by 2 knights. With attacks, mana, Elena used the young master Ghislain. "My big brother, what is happening?" But he hit her to sleep directly to devote himself to the battle. Frank says, "Thank you for doing this work for us, O older son of Bertium. You are a lot different from what I heard. We were planning to take care of these ourselves." He approached the young master and says whether you were hiding your real skills. The young master looks at them. He says to himself, 3. You are the 2 who are next to him, not something. But what is in the middle has a large amount of mana, and at a different level. I must finish this quickly. The young man asks Frank, "Let me ask you one thing." Frank says, "Well, there's something that a dead man knows that." The young master says, "I knew that you would not say that easily. It does not matter." The young master prepares his sword to fight them. He says you will want to speak soon, including enough, anyway. Frank, there's of the 2 people who were with him to hold him alive, and break it all the party in his body, so that he cannot resist him with madness. He has to suffer a lot until his body is beautiful. They go quickly towards the young master to try to kill him. The young master attacks them, and one of them hit his head to fall on the ground. The second person tries to attack the young man, but he repels the attack. The attack is returned to him, and his head is cut off from the young master and Ghislain from behind. The young master feels a surprise attack from behind and is confronting him. Frank did not understand what happened. He says to himself, "Was he able to repel off my offensive in this position?" It was also an ideal, suggestive attack. The master of the people attacking Frank. The attack affects your sins in his neck, but he continues the attack on the young master, and was not affected by the injury. Pharmac says, "I am surprised. If I was missing the mana, I would have cut my head. Now, did El Mana focus on his neck to reduce the damage?" Frank says, "I have no thought. How you teach you such a strange duel in this matter, but you will die here. You cannot defeat me with such a weak force. You will die here." The young Ghislain repels the attack, and Berker Frank is in the face. Frank says, "I did not tell you that it will not work with this amount of mana." While Frank talks to the young master, he is a false one, falls on the ground, and the blood perfectly says to himself, and he is annoyed. What has just happened? It is impossible to be able to penetrate my sense of my skill level. The young master Ghislain says, "I never expected that there would be a real guilty behind the death of Elena. If you were you, prepare yourself." The third nucleus, unleash Frank, looking at the young master and saying, "How did you reinforce the mana to this big limit?" The young master attacks Frank with strong and repeated strikes. Frank says in himself, "This is impossible, for my hand has become narcotic only from repelling his strikes. Regardless of the amount of mana pulled, it usually has a limited effect. I have never heard about a way that increases the strength of the mana in a stunning way. So it seems as if he became a different person." The young master Ghislain affects Frank in his chest. Says Frank, "Let's finish our previous conversation." We do." The young master says, "Who is the person who asked for this?" Frank says to himself that I will not drop this easily. I will accompany his young master, at least with me, and try to throw a dagger towards Elena. But the young master creates the strands of mana on the body of Frank, and cannot resist him. Frank says, "Are these strands created using mana? I cannot move whenever he does this." The young master is stabbing Frank and destroying the essence of all mana. For Frank, he says, "Is it crazy? One wrong movement, and the reverse flow of mana can cause an explosion and destroy this entire area. Do you plan to destroy yourself?" The young master says this may happen to non-skilled people like do. Pharmac is afraid and screaming. I say that Dismond was the person who asked for this. He said he needs any pretext to start a war against my family, Bertium and Dagard. The young master Ghislain says, "In my previous life, such actions were left to families allied with the Dookie families. Duke Dolphin, How dared to organize this nonsense behind the scenes? The young master says to your Frank, and for this reason, I want to kill Elena. He says, yes. The young master stabbed Frank. He says to him, screaming, what you are doing is different from what you promised. The young master says, what happened? I killed a lot. However, you feel fear when your role comes. Frank says nothing will change. Even if you kill me, I finished the work. My mission in Digard. Do you think that people will listen to the pioneer like you? The young master beats him at the face. Says Frank will collapse Bordium because of the war. The young master says he is holding ahead. Let me tell you something. I was born again after death. Therefore, it will be different this time. The young master destroying the mana inside Frank. He looks at Elena while she is sleeping, then falls from the pain, and from the wounds that he suffered. He says the cursing was not the nucleus explosion at all when I was the property of the mercenary. The young master goes to enter one of the houses, to find him as a break and find 2 dead men. He says in my previous life, they found another corpse alongside Elena in this place. According to what this man said previously, he looks at the man and says that he is the son of Digard. So this is the way they silenced and photographed them as killing Elena. At the moment when this is revealed, the war will be. Let's erase this guide. The young master burns the house and leaves and takes his sister with him and says, I will not make things happen as you want. While he is leaving the place of the battle, there was a man who monitored him. Events are transferred to the location of the planners. Meeting for the coup of the kingdom. One of them says we sent guards as well as Frank is better than us. Not you can even take care of one girl only. Someone says, have you gave up your caution because you think the work will be easy? The man who was watching the people was all because of Gisela and Bertium. One of the leaders in the meeting says that the whip is useless in the north. I am sure that you are well aware that washing is a trivial, useless. Are you really using it as his misery? The man says it was completely different from the information and rumors we have about it. It was as if it were a completely different person. But we have already taken care of the matters related to Bedigard, so there will be no problem in the start of the regional war. Please give me another chance. The leader says a shift that you cannot even find enough information about one child. Do you realize how much this caused is unable to finish an easy task, and now you want another opportunity. They scream the rule in all of the meeting, spend it on it. During their screaming, one of the great leaders comes and says, oh, Bustle, what kind of opportunity do you want? A spyman screaming and says, I will get rid of Gisela and Bertium. They say how? The man says, I will make it happen. Normally, there is a person in my mind. His name is Ken Logis, that he is famous for his resurrection based on strength, despite his young age. As he is an example of power, I can tell you with all confidence that there is no one in the north comparable to his strength. In addition to that, as Kayan is the cousin, the leader says, if it fails again, there will be no chance that the story will be transferred to the Bertium Kook. The training hall. Fergus enters the young master. He tells him that he is close to food. The young master releases the sword towards Fergus. It is attached to the rope of the mana, says, well, this is enough. The young master did not pay attention to the old man. Virgos, the old man says here, sorry, sir, how did you do that? The young master says that this was the thread of the mana, that it was used. The young master says in himself, in my previous life, I used it all the time, but at the level of my current skills, I needed a fundamental bombing in order to use it, as I used to use, because I lacking the mana. But if you created only one thread to use a less than the mana, I can still use it despite the lack of mana. The old man says, I think I have trained the special mana for a long time, but I have not seen anything like this before. The old man says in himself, only a period of time, not to use the training. How was he able to reach the idea of using mana? This, the young master says. However, do you want anything from me? The old man says, I want to stop to say this. Thank you for protecting the young lady. Sayer, the young man says, do you thank me? But it was something I had to do. Let's go to eat. After a few days after that, the festival was temporarily stopped. It was logical, since one of the knights of the guards tried to smuggle the young lady. Elena, the young master, says everyone thinks that I am lying when I say you are the one who saved me. You must go and tell them something. The young master says, no, they will not believe, Blinda says, which is annoyed. Jamal and Philip were trying to use you to themselves, so is this Bags. I knew they were deviated. The young master says Elena has been able to stop the war from happening, but I am sure they will not give up. I cannot stop them alone forever. I need to develop a military force. I must engage more in politics in order to do so. Between what is immersed in thinking, the servant enters and prohibits them food. Looking at the budget and says Blinda, why do we get dessert first? Dessert. You know how we are. The young master Ghislaine hears annoying voices from the outside, demanding compensation for the damage caused by the cancellation of the festival. Some merchants have gathered around the palace, demanding compensation. They say, go out. You people swim in money. The guards are trying to calm him down, but they do not listen to them. The young master looks at the top and asks what is happening against hell. Blinda says, I knew they would do this. You know that. Our boycott is full of merchants. Those who earn their livelihood from the profits that come from the festival, isn't it? It was good for them in the past year, but since the festival was cancelled, it is logical. Just one day, will they feel annoyed? The young master says the boycott is badly. This as well, they will become more aggressive if I do not do anything about them. The old man asks Fergus what the soldiers do. Send them to calm this crowd. The old man says that they have no soldiers, that most of them have been sent to the monsters of the monsters, to restore reconstruction because of the Guylan raid. The young master Bertium says, in a state of war, forever, because of the barbarians in the north, and on the other side, there is a monster forest, which monsters can come from at any moment. He says to himself, neither gets nor soldiers from the chaos. He goes to Plenda and says to her, let's talk. You are the person who runs my money, right? Let's use this to calm down these merchants. Blinda tells him that there is no money. Have you forgotten that the count has cut your allocations? Because you spent money like water. The young master says in himself, if I have no money at all, I am bankrupt. The young master asks Plinda to lend some money, but she tells him that she does not have any money. He goes to the window and looks down and says, no money or soldiers. What we have without even the lowest amount of money. There is nothing I can do. Even if I have knowledge of the future, I will need money first. While it is immersed in thinking, soldier Ricardo enters him. The young master Ricardo says, why are you in his hurry? What happened? Soldier Ricardo says there is the problem of the young master, Ken, who wants to see you. The story is transferred to Mr. Kayan, who is hitting the soldiers of the young Ghislaine. The young master enters, and looks at his soldiers lying on the ground, and says, the young man is upset and says your role. Finally, Mr. Kan says, finally. The main character approached the young master Saisi. Remember this face and the air of Logus province, with which we have allied with Kan Logish, was my only friend at the time, and me and my fool asking the young master Ricardo, what is the situation, soldier? Ricardo says, as you see, we have responded to a report of a disturbance. In his melodies we found, Kan there, with his accompanying knight, got to know us and asked if the rumors about the young master are correct. 3-4. Commander Scofin explained the details of the rumors to him. Caught the leader of the leader. Scovani said to him, do you dare lie to Logus's heir? And this is what happened. Kan says if you are going to tell him, it is better to tell him the truth. You have claimed that you have never been trained. And I dealt with what? The cavalry accompanying the disgraced. For this reason, gave him a small awakening call that would not have happened if you did not lie in the first place. Young Master Ghislaine says to himself, yes, it was this type of men. He always treated me as a lord every time he visited Bordium. He was always chaos. Even after causing all this problems, no one was able to say anything. Because I was a subordinate to him in the first place, no one underestimated Bacon. On the opposite, who was always suffering from the lack of a deficiency. His bold confidence and behavior were praised as recipes worthy of the higher end. For this reason, I was subjected to more criticism than Mr. Cain looks at the king of mercenaries. The young Ghiselin says to himself, "Look at this man in the habit. He would attack me with this amount of provocation." Events have been transferred to logos clips for some time. It appears in front of us. Can says, "What do you want me to kill Ghiselin?" The spy man says, "If you succeed in this task, then the distinguished person will support the Lugus Familician." Says it is not difficult to deal with someone like him, but Ghiselin Li is also an heir to his kingdom. How can I get rid of him? The spy man says you can lure Ghiselin into his parish, which makes it appear as if an unfortunate accident occurred. It will appear simply as if it was a trivial dispute between the heirs. I will accompany you in a Ferris uniform, accompanying the situation, so there is no need to worry. This is an uncommon opportunity even for you. Can says, to believe that I will be forced to kill my cousin. Ghiselin is go immediate. Events are transferred to the accident site. Can says, "Why you are still standing, since you know that I am here. It is better to attend that thing that has been prepared for me. I heard that the festival has stopped, so let us rise to the mood and spend a great time." We were always simultaneous when it comes to things like this. Am I wrong, my friend? The young master, Ghiselin, thinks. Then he says to himself, "Do you talk about that? It is true that this man was always asking me to prepare alcohol and women every time he comes here. I agreed to his request at the time because I did not want to be beaten, but not yet, because I had to waste the precious money of my custodians." The young master, he says, "If you remember, it is better to bring them now." The young master says, "Yes, of course, it is better to bring them now, but isn't you a debt to pay me to say can? I will pay." What the young master says, "You realize that I was dealing with everything I asked for me Bamwali, not also reply to me. What I paid was accompanied by 1,000 gold pieces, the capital, in addition to the benefit," says Can. "What is 1,000 golden pieces? All this should not cost you up to 100 golden pieces. You were doing it to thank me for being your friend. It is like friendship Effes." The young master says, "I have taken you for a long time, so I paid what you need before I put you down. I need a lot of money now as you can." Can gets angry and rises from his place. He says, "He started to act with all as a result of him only because I was tolerated with you. It seems that you think you are really stronger only because you have published a rumor that says that you won a knight. You are nothing, and this is the reason that everyone in the north invites you to be buzzing, while all that you do is the supposed heir is just an empty nonsense." Can is attacking the young master and tells him to collect yourself. The master of the young man avoids the Cain attack, trying to hit him again, but he avoids all its ingenuity. The young master responds to him and strikes him in his stomach by striking him with strongness. The young master directs the strike towards his face, but Ken repels the beating with his bare hand, then falls on the ground from the pain. The young master says, "Stop the moan. I know that you prevented that beating spy man who makes his facilities." He screams at the young man and says, "Ghiselin's retreat. What do you think you are doing?" Those present in the pub, looking at the situation while they are surprised by what happened. The young master looks at the audience and smiles, and says, "If this is the way you want to play." Ken looks at his accompanying guard, says, "What you think of an acting?" Says the guard, "And the spy was excellent. I perfectly prepared the theater to pretend that the mistake was from Ghiselin in front of everyone's eyes. This must be more than enough to justify the fencing." Ken says to himself, "Of course, it is a rare opportunity to get such strong support. I must make sure to leave a permanent impression this time. This is the time for the ideal, to get rid of the fall of the fallen power. How do you dare to distort the dignity of the nobles by lies? Ghiselin dares you to boycott him, and throws the palm on a face and tells him, 'I dare you to the Can Logis duel.' The heir insulted me in front of the people of Burdium, and I assaulted a Persian and distorted the dignity of Nabi." He looks at him while he is annoyed. He says, "Do not think about denying that not." Chin smiles, saying, "I knew you were stupid, but I did not know that you are stupid, including enough to dig your grave yourself. No, I accept your duet. Do not regret it, even if it is dead. young master Yammer. Ricardo to bring all the merchants who protest around the castle. Tell them that I will earn a lot of money for them. Festival was suddenly cancelled and the atmosphere that leads to its climax is suddenly cool, leaving behind some tourists. Those who were unable to return due to remorse should be in the state of incomplete rage, because they are unable to spend their money or their time in such a situation. If an event is held to calm them down, on the day of dueling in the field, the ducting suspended is spent. It is a confusion between the young master, Kayan and Gisalinthi. Bet on your money on the young master, Kayan. Finally this dreaded naughty will get what he deserves. The markets in the city are recovering with people and selling their goods, and some of them go to bet on. Mr. Kayan looks at the young master and says, "How dared to convert a sacred duct into such a market? Let me explain this before we start. My sword, it will not stop even if I surrender." The young man looks and says, "Sahi, this must be what you seek. Now, since we seem to have enough people gathered, let's start the spy and facilities say no. I do not think that a suitable bet can continue at this rate." The Mosque of Bets looks at the paper and says, "Well, no one is betting on his money on the Duke of Giselin, so therefore, to be fair, the result is very clear. This naughty has no chance against the young master Kan. Anyone who brought a stunned person with the stupidity enough to bet on the other side." Kan says even the market ignores the accompanying spy. Kane, to change the contents of the bet, he says, "Let's change the matter to the time he can withstand the young master Kan." But the commander Scovin changes the equation. Despite the injury of God, that he came to see the fencing and decide to bet on the Duke of Giselin. Likewise, we are betting on her older brother. The audience did not believe that. Mrs. Elena Bub betted on Giselin. Elena says to the bet mosque, "This should be enough, is it? Not like that." He says, "Yes, this should be enough." Mr. Kayan says, "I am waiting for no reason." The young master says, "Then prepare, as you know. I am older than you. After all, it will look a little strange if you do the first step as well." The young master is preparing and telling him to attack. Telling him, "Ken, don't you think that time has missed behaving like an older person?" Kan begins the attack on Giselin, but he repels the Kane attack with his sword, says, "Kan, I have already descended to a very low level, so that you cannot save your face now." Giselin avoids the attack. Kane, the earth, with his foot with a strong scoring, shattered the earth. The audience looks at the impact of the trick on the ground, and they say as expected from Mr. Kan will not bear until one blow from him. Blinda says, "What do we do?" The young lady, "We have to stop them now." As for the accompanying spy, it is too late. Regardless of who is the opponent, the moment they decide to direct their swords against Ken, that they are trapped in the act. The opponent is affected by that tremendous force. He will be concerned with thinking that there is no chance of counterattack. All his energy will be used only in dribbling at the end of the exhausted discount. After dribbling for a period of time, it will open it, and its end will always be won by Ken this way. Ken says, "You slipped, as you always seemed, that your skills have already evolved from what they were before wearing it as well." Ken attacks and says, "I have always been good to escape away from the old days." The young master Giselin is trying to repel the attack, and the darkest was stronger than that to repel it, to fly in the sky. The friends of the young master looks at fear for him. As for the spy, he smiles and says it is over. Giselin, but the surprise was here when Mr. Ba-el Shuklub, and he descended on the ground as if there was nothing. The young master said, "I wanted to tolerate you, but you exceeded the limit." He headed towards Kan with a speeding sword. However, Kan is affected by the attack. "The escort," says the escort. He returned to his stable condition by intensifying the mana in his legs. The young master says to Kaien, "The art of arrogant perseverance like this. You must think you are the strongest, only because the opponent will feel fear. If you show a little of your strength, let me open your eyes." Ken attacks him and says, "Yes. How will you do that?" The young master repels the attack and carried out a repeated attack on the Kane of multiple areas. Kane attacks a sword on the young master. but he presses the sword with his foot on the ground. The young master is his foot from the sword, but Kan's body was full of wobody. The audience looks at them while they are surprised by what happened in the fencing, screaming what it was. Now the Duke of Giseline has improved a lot. Will he win the bus? The cursing has bet on the young master. As for the friends of the young master, they were very happy. Ken says to himself, the wounds are superficial, although he could have made it deeper. How can this naughty show this level of the art of fencing? The young master throws his sword to the ground and says, a gap like this in the skills that will not provide enough entertainment. I will only fight my hand from now on. Mr. Ken is upset and says, what is the young master? He tells him, I think I should take this opportunity to educate you today with my bare grip.